there, among the first. And I always thought that Kenneth had a wonderful experience at the school because he's extremely smart. I did not have a good experience, and I assumed it's because I was not smart like people, like Kenneth. And so he tells me his story here of his first days at Garrison Junior High School. And I like to give everything a title because I think that really people speak in poetry, kind of little poems. Hot off the press. The first day of Garrison Junior High I will never forget. Because I went to Garrison from Lou's house. I was living there at the time. My mom was probably home. She'd been sick, but she was probably back, at home. But I was living at Lou's just because it was fun living up there. And I remember I will never forget the very first day I walked into Garrison. There was a line of children greeting new students. We were all 7th graders. I didn't even know what my class assignment was. Didn't know where to go. I might have had some paperwork with me, but I don't remember. I had the best little notebook I could find. I remember my clothes were not very nice, and I think I had a pair of dungarees that might have had a hole in the knee. I just remember I felt disheveled. And I went there, and I remember there was a group of white kids, and they laughed at me. I remember they laughed at me. And when I walked in, they gave each other that, what? Kind of look. And they laughed at me. And I'll never forget that. Yeah. I remember that. I don't think the faculty at Garrison, with a couple of notable exceptions, I don't think they cared about the black students there. I got that sense. You remember 1961, 1960, that was before the integration, that was before the 1964 Civil Rights Act, that was before a lot of things had taken place. And there were relatively few blacks at Garrison when I went there. I got the impression that the faculty either didn't want me in the class or that they were indifferent about my success. And no one convinced me that I was someone that they were willing to invest their time in. I didn't get the sense that anyone thought I was worth investing time in because for whatever reason that wasn't specified, maybe they thought I was stupid because I was African American, I don't know. But for whatever reason, they were not willing to put forth the effort because it probably would be a failure. That's the impression I got. And I can't remember the faculty names except for Elaine. Do you remember the teacher? She was one of the first African Americans to get a doctorate, I think from Hopkins. I think her name was Elaine Davis. No, she was not a teacher of ours. She was a super type A. She was one of the first women in my recollection who'd gotten a doctorate. And this woman was just work and no nonsense. She was vice principal. She wasn't our teacher. She was vice principal at Garrison for a very brief time. And I remember one time her coming into our class. She came into the class to give us a lecture. And she was dead serious and ice cold. And she wrote faster than anyone I have ever seen write. She hit the blackboard like she was trying to knock the chalk through the board. I mean, she wrote. And so I remember her. And there were a few other black students in my class in 8th grade. But I had there was a math problem, I remember. Remember I was telling you about mental arithmetic, I could never do it. And at the time, I associated the ability to do that with intelligence. And it probably has something to do with intelligence. But the fact that one can't do it doesn't mean that you're destined to fail in technical careers. And I remember I had an Algebra 1 class in 8th grade. I don't remember the teacher's name, interestingly enough. And I had a real hard time with the arithmetic classes. I wasn't very good at number manipulation in the traditional sense on long divisions and that kind of stuff. And I remember algebra was a significant step, more complicated. It was a quantum leap. And I can remember that I was really intimidated by it, and I didn't get it. There's a certain logic to what algebra is. You either get that logic, in which case what you're trying to do makes sense, or you don't get that logic and you can't do it. It doesn't matter how fast you add. It has to do with how you see relationships. What an equal sign means and what something in balance means, as opposed to something that's out of balance. It doesn't have anything to do with arithmetic. And I can remember 8th grade really struggling very hard to try to figure out what was going on and believing that this success in algebra was key to anything I wanted to do in life. If I failed here, I would forever be doing menial tasks in life. It was just as critical. And I had gotten the homework assignments. I could never do them. I never turned it in right. I couldn't follow what was going on in class. And I had gone home one evening, and I had kind of half dozen problems that we were supposed to solve. The simplest of algebraic problems based on equalities, you know, a couple of variables on one side, you had to add up your x's, add up your y's, solve the problem, get x equal y. And I must have studied that problem for hours. And I was like, I was in tears about it, because this is like, I'd met something that I can't climb this hill, I'm not going to be able to do this, so it's over for me. I'm just never going to be anything in life, I'm going to fail. And I can remember deciding that if I gave up, I was giving up on life. It was just that critical. And so I couldn't give up, I couldn't leave the table until I actually figured out what was going on. And it took probably about another hour. I can remember doodling with my pencil. I can remember moving things back and forth across the sign. And I can remember practicing making little X's and little Y's, just stupid things like that, just over and over again. And then a light bulb went off. I saw the logic of the problem. I saw the logic of what the equation was about and how to solve it. And then, from that point on, I kind of shot to the top of the class in math all the way through school because I saw the light. And what that taught me was that there are some times when you have to figure out what the rules of the game really are. You can't play the game itself. You're not going to get good at the game unless you understand what the game is. And if you understand what the purpose of the game is, and then the nuanced aspects of how you get good at the game make sense. The rule of algebra is, take a look at an expression, which can be simple or very complicated, and do your best to isolate, as long as the expression is in balance, what's on the left side. If there's truly an equal sign between the two, there's a certain set of rules that will allow you to do things like keep it in balance. You're dealing with an equality, and if you're moving things back and forth across the equal sign, you have to make sure you do it in a way so the equal sign is in fact not violated, because that's an inequality, and that's not, well, there's a lot of inequalities in math, but that's not what this particular set of lessons was about. And then later on in life, I could understand how algebraic expressions allowed you to represent stuff that was going on in the real world. That's my friend, Kenneth Phillips. Hold your applause. Kenneth Phillips is the reason why there is an endeavor in this museum. Could you turn the lights up and ask these young people to applaud Dr. Kenneth Phillips? Where are you? On your feet. So 20 years ago, Dr. Phillips really believed that they could get the endeavor here, and he worked very hard to convince other people who do it that was the case, and he got the support of his boss, and he just doggedly did it every single day. And it just, when I think about that story, and I think there's not a month that goes by that I don't think about that story of Kenneth sitting at the dining room table in tears until he figured out how to do the problem. My challenge to you is to just as persistently find a way to use acting to interrupt something that's not equal. To put yourself in other people's shoes when it's not equal. And to take on the part of the person who's on the wrong side of a lopsided equation. So what would that look like? You would have been back at Garrison Junior High School the white kid who would have come to school in torn dungarees. And ask some of your other friends to put themselves in the position of torn dungarees. To put themselves in the position of being on the outside. Because by using this technique of putting yourself in other people's shoes, you can help hearts grow. And we need that in the world as much as we need science and math. These are the human endeavors. So my challenge to you is to build human endeavors. Give me a couple questions, then we probably have to